everyone, and welcome to our event today. You are in for a very special treat. March is Women's History Month, and all across the world, we are celebrating the many contributions that women, past and present, have made in our communities around the world, in science, in business, sports, social movements, and so many other fields. Most importantly for our panel today, specifically the technology founders space. As your host today, my name is Misty Smith. I'm the Vice President of Operations at Shaco, and we are celebrating Women's History Month by welcoming 4 inspirational leaders in the tech space who will be sharing their stories of how they, as women, are making a difference, enriching the lives around them, paving their own path, and reinventing all along the way. We will be talking about triumph, adversities, and important advice to share for women in technology. Let's meet our stellar panel today and dive into each of their personal journeys and how their experiences have shaped their leadership styles and approaches to entrepreneurship. First, we have Meg Pride, founder and CEO at Brandify app. The Brandify app helps beauty enthusiasts find affordable beauty alternatives to cult favorite products through extensive comparative reviews. Next, we have Jessica Heinzelman, co-founder and COO at Throne Labs. Throne is reinventing the modern bathroom experience. They are building a network of standalone, ultra-clean, smart bathrooms that can be booked through their application, enabling users to leave home with confidence and spend less time seeking relief. We also have Celia Castleman, CEO and co-founder of The Drop, and Kelly Cox, COO and co-founder of The Drop. The Drop is the first mobile app to match human milk donors with recipients in real time. Based on the ease and technology of popular dating apps, The Drop builds a community for users with an excess supply of milk to donate to those who need it. Well, welcome, ladies. I really appreciate you joining us today. I wanted to start by asking to hear from each of you. We want to know about your journey. Walk us through where you began and where you are today, and what dreams and motivations propelled this journey forward. Let's start with Meg.
Great. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so happy to be here and to talk about women in tech on this panel with all these great founders. And Brandify helps consumers compare prestige brand beauty products to more affordable versions. We're a mobile platform with hundreds of thousands of users, and we've actually saved consumers over $12 million to date. And based on the data from our mobile app and from our community, we've actually launched our own skincare line. And that's what I'm really passionate about in the tech space, is this mobile technology that results in real world benefits to our consumers.
So I'm a co-founder of Throne Labs. We've all probably felt the stress that comes with having to go to the bathroom when you're outside of your home or office and not really knowing where to find one that's clean and accessible. And that's the premise on which we started Throne. Basically, we're building a product that is modernizing the portable bathroom in a way that makes it feel really nice and clean, almost like an indoor bathroom with porcelain fixtures and running water and hand washing. And one thing that we're really proud of that everyone loves is you actually don't have to touch a thing, because people can enter and exit without their hands, using their mobile app and a suite of sensors that we have inside. And I think, my journey to this place was I've always loved building things and creating things. And I've always really felt passionate about solving real problems that affect people's daily lives. And so when my co-founder, Fletcher Wilson, and I met through a mutual friend who was also a founder and entrepreneur, we just started talking, and we started talking about toilets and how tough it is for rideshare drivers and others that are out and about in the world, and decided to tackle it together. And personally, I had a very winding career, everything from political consulting to tech-enabled programming, like impact programming for the international development space. And I really felt like founding Throne and joining the team I'm part of was going to allow me to have that, have even more impact. So
Thank you.
That's what I did.
Fantastic. Kelly and Celia, what need did you see to begin your business and begin this life of entrepreneurship? Tell us about your journey.
So I owned and operated a yoga studio here in Charlottesville, and its main focus was on supporting women through their childbearing years. So we had prenatal yoga, postnatal yoga, but then on top of that, we offered birth education classes, baby massage, grief and loss support groups, and then someone came to me probably 2 years into the studio being open and asked if she could host a lactation support group. And she came every Friday for almost 8 years, and it was packed. And so what I saw, my training, I'm also a birth doula, was helping women kind of take care of their bodies physically. I'm a former therapist, so I was working on kind of the mental health aspect of it, but then also prep them for labor. And what I really saw was this kind of great need for more postnatal support. So a lot of postnatal depression, and I think the number one cause of that was women not being able to feed their child as they maybe had hoped, but really how society had told them it had to be done. We have this kind of breast is best policy, and formula is awful. And I just saw so many women struggling with it that the wheels started turning. And then at the same time, I was attempting to date, like use mobile dating apps. And literally, long day at the studio, came home and I was emailing one client who had milk and another client who needed it. And I got a notification on my phone that I'd matched with this guy. And so I thought, well, wait a second. What if families could just go on this app and then make their profile really simple? How old is their baby? Do they have any dietary restrictions? How far they're willing to travel to exchange milk? And then couldn't they just get the notification and start messaging and then go out and meet each other? So it's just been kind of living in my head. And after the pandemic and the studio closed, it just kind of seemed like no time was better. And I just happened to have met Celia. She was a client of mine at the studio, and I was her doula. Once you're someone's doula, you have a pretty close relationship. And she was also a mother of three. She has her own breastfeeding and sharing story, and it just was this wonderful match.
Yeah, so Kelly and I met when I was pregnant with my third, and I was preparing for my third birth. And with all three of my children, I was what's considered an overproducer. So I had expressed more milk than my babies needed. And for my first two children, I had close friends that couldn't supply enough. And so I was just letting them use whatever I didn't need. With my third child here in Virginia, I didn't find anyone that needed my milk, but I couldn't bear getting rid of it. So I went on Facebook, and there are over 500,000 users on social media that are doing peer-to-peer milk sharing that I had no idea about. And I posted, and a woman drove 140 miles round trip to get milk for her twins that she couldn't supply enough of herself. So we realized that we're on to something. And the other thing that was more kind of interesting to us as we kind of went down this path was that we discovered that, according to the CDC, 60% of women don't breastfeed as long as they intend. So there's a want and desire to, but they're not able to make it there. And the US is one of 7 countries, only 7 countries, that do not have a national paid maternity leave. And we just felt like, well, we're going to jump in and do something. The recommended time for exclusive breast milk for children has always been 6 months, and in the U.S., only 25% of babies make that mark, and that number hasn't changed in over 2 decades. So we thought, it's time to move that needle. And we wanted to start this movement, and especially knowing how new families need support and community, we just said, let's do this.
Fantastic. Thank you, Kelly and Celia. Meg, let's hear from you about the dreams and motivations that brought you on your journey, and a little bit more about Brandify.
Awesome. Yeah, I've always loved building and making things and really fell in love with technology because it actually gives you the opportunity to interact back and really communicates with you. I remember the first time I downloaded the Brandify beta app and got to actually interact with it. It's so powerful. And I think that part of what I motivates me is really our consumer and what she wants. Brandify, just for a little bit of background, helps consumers find affordable beauty products, both beauty products, health and wellness products. And we actually have launched our own skincare line based on the data from our mobile app. And that consumer really keeps me going. She loves what we do, and we saved women over $12 million last year. And that's my main driver, my main motivation.
That's amazing. That is a lot of savings. Fantastic, ladies. It was great hearing more about your companies and what started you or propelled you on that journey. I want to shift into some questions about leadership. I know, Kelly, you were just touching on your background. I would love to hear a little bit more about how you contribute as a leader within your own company. And it's interesting because, what do you see as your industry, and how does that impact the community overall?
I've always been a big believer in knowing what your strengths are and what your weaknesses are, and really then propelling anyone that I bring on. So when I would hire anyone for the studio or thought about bringing Slee on as a partner, it was really having a lot of autonomy in people and allowing them to use their skill set as best they can, and I don't need to, just because I'm in charge or I'm the leader or the founder doesn't mean that I do everything correctly. It's really kind of building a team of everyone that can support me and that I can support. And then I think really just building a presence within your community. Charlottesville is really small, and we have been so lucky to have so much support come out of this, especially from our advisory board. And I would like to think that they are kind of on our side because this is the greatest idea that anyone's ever had, which of course we think. But we realize that the reason we're able to get this kind of high caliber support is because that's how we've always been in the community. We're both have strong work ethics. We're very professional, but we take part in the community. My kind of just personal philosophy is why live in a community if you're not going to be part of it. So especially at the studio, I knew everyone I needed to know. I made sure that if my clients asked any questions about any support they needed, that I knew where to send them and why. And I think I created a reputation for myself that this is someone you can go to. She is honorable. She's trustworthy. And Celia has too. And so, sometimes we get into this idea of like nepotism and it's who you know. But I believe it's who you know, but it's how you know them and how they know you. And so we really feel like by being active in the community, supporting women as much as we can, being really approachable, it's helped create these reputations that people are like, oh, those two are going to do something, and then they kind of perk up. So I guess just knowing your skills, knowing what you like. I mean, there are certain things that I just don't even do. Like I think I laughed last week that we were on this Women in Tech forum because I'm the least tech savvy person ever. But that's why we reach out and to other people to kind of fill those holes. And I think once you do that as a leader, it makes people want to figure out what they're good at and how can they shine and really feel supported.
Fantastic. That is so true. It's about building those connections and leaning into your pieces and relying on others and trusting that they can help you bridge any gaps that there may be. I wanted to ask Jess about how her voice has shaped her company and the products that she offers.
Yeah, definitely. I love I think similarly we think about diversity and skills, and very similarly, I think we really value different perspectives at Throne. An engineer knows some things, but the truck driver knows other things even better. So making sure that we're really tapping into the people that are closest to the work and valuing that. And I think, one of the things I think I really bring as a woman in particular, on our team is a different perspective to bathrooms. I think there are a couple of really fascinating ways that just having moved through this world as a woman has shaped our product. So even in my first conversations with my co-founder Fletcher, before I even joined up, we were talking about how to position thrones, and he was like, well, of course you'd put the door kind of out of sight and facing away from the street so that people aren't embarrassed to go in. And I said, oh my goodness, as a woman, that would be so scary, because you're coming out into kind of a protected area where someone might be waiting for you or things like that. And so I think, and now we actually have a policy where we place the door out within visibility of the general public because of that. And I think, that type of thing at a larger level, and then even the small things around making sure that we have a bin for the menstrual products. And we've had very lively debates about urinal or no urinal, and kind of bringing that perspective. And I think you see in a lot of research, similarly, companies with women in leadership or on advisory boards always just do better. And so I think I'm really proud of being able to offer that to Throne, and really hope for the industry at writ large, that we start to have more women integrated into leadership positions, but also just the important conversations that are shaping our everyday products.
Fantastic. Meg, obviously, 12 million in savings, that's a pretty big impact to the community and your users, but anything you wanted to add as far as your contributions within your company?
Thank you. I think it's really interesting because I think as women, we're asked to like justify our contributions a lot, and I don't think that necessarily needs to be the case. I do think that I bring a diverse perspective that can relate to my user more effectively than maybe um, somebody who's not as close to my user. And that's certainly added value, but I just want to see like more women in technology because we deserve to be there and we should be there. And it was really interesting because I was on a call about NFTs through a fund that's invested in Brandify. And it was this woman from another fund who has $2 billion of capital to deploy. And she's setting up a conference on NFTs, and she cannot find female CEOs in this new tech space that's emerging to be a part of that conference. And so it does kind of make you think like, where are we, and why aren't we there more? And makes you think kind of differently about women in technology, and especially in women in new technologies. And I think if I could share one message to any women listening to this podcast, it would be like, just do it. Nobody else knows any more than you. Just go for it. The only difference between the four of us on this panel and Misty at Shaco is, or the only difference between us as a group on this video and somebody who maybe wants to be in this group is that we've actually started to do something. That is literally the only difference. So,
Yeah,
sorry
it's
for
a
my
movement.
not sorry for my diatribe.
No, not at all. Don't be
Yeah.
sorry. It is. It's
Yeah.
the journey of a million miles starts with one step. I think it's that's you're right that that's something we can do. It harkens back to Kelly's comment about I'm not tech savvy, but yet here I am, and we're building an app. So I think that is definitely rings true.
And I would say, just to build off of what Meg was saying, is that I never saw myself as an entrepreneur or a CEO. I spent my entire career supporting others and working in the entrepreneurial ecosystem. I was always like a associate director and executive director in different organizations, and I loved that role. I loved being part of that team, but never being in the forefront. And it wasn't till the pandemic, on maternity leave with my third, and meeting someone who saw something in me that I hadn't seen. And it was like, oh yeah, I went to business school. I worked in all of these roles. I could actually take that step. And I'm like a middle-aged woman. And I think that it definitely took someone else to see that in me, because I never saw that in myself. And now that we're doing it, it's kind of like, why hadn't I been doing it? So I think my advice too would be, it's never too late. You probably do have the skills, and it's finding for us, it was, seeing an obvious problem that had a solution. We're not curing cancer. There are people with and there are people without, and let's kind of level the playing field through technology.
I love that. Sorry, we could just keep going all day.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's really helpful. I had the hardest time calling myself an entrepreneur at the beginning of my journey. It's like, why did it take that long? Why does it take that long for women in particular to feel comfortable calling ourselves leaders or entrepreneurs or technologists? It shouldn't take us that long.
Yeah, and why does it take someone else seeing something in us? I do feel like men see promise in themselves all the time. And it's just they're conditioned to do so, and we're kind of conditioned not to. And so, yeah, the number of friends that I've looked over job descriptions, and they're like, I don't know if I'm quite qualified for this, and I have to be like, you are. And really like holding ourselves up together is so important.
Yeah, I mean, I think first of all, once you use a doula, like they are in your business forever. So I saw other things in her,
Right inside of me.
but I've seen this woman run her family, and it is like running a business. I mean, it is structured in that there's activities, and that she makes chocolate chip pancakes every single morning, and I was like, what? But like when you watch someone just live their life, it's business skills too, right? How they navigate the world, how they navigate interactions with other people, whether it's managing a household or taking on a business. Like we're all CEOs and COOs, right? Of everything. We just need to own it a little bit more.
Yeah, I also feel like once we reach a certain level of maturity, an age, if you will, you start to just suddenly have more confidence and really care a lot less about what other people think, because you know where you are and where you stand. So, with that in mind, what core strength do you think you currently utilize that you would have told your younger self to foster sooner, to believe in earlier in your journey to help you along the way? We'll start with Meg.
Sure. So I think it's about being your own best advocate. Nobody else is gonna, we've touched on this a little bit already, but nobody else is gonna be that advocate for you. And I think a lot of times, like we think, oh, someone will see this, someone will notice the effort that I'm putting into X, Y, or Z. And even on my team, like I love it when people are their own advocates. And for myself as well as a leader, I think it's like our job to be our company's advocate as well as ourselves, um, because we're really the only ones there doing it for you. And I think I learned that at some point in high school, but it's something that I think about a lot, especially going through a fundraise process and being venture backed. It's very much a part of our ethos.
Fantastic. Kelly, Celia, either of you have any key thoughts with something you would have fostered in yourself earlier?
I mean, I think just confidence, but it comes with experience. Comes with experience. I mean, education experience, but really watching other people, but having the confidence that, first of all, you have a great idea. Because when we opened the yoga studio, people were like you're just going to do this yoga studio just for pregnant women, and it's so weird and off that, but it was a huge success. And so if you have something that kind of makes you feel alive, then have more confidence in it that you're not going to be the only one, and that people will catch on. But you have to walk around a little taller, and it's hard not to doubt yourself, especially as a woman in business. But yeah, confidence, in everything, and whatever you can take from an experience, whether that's good or bad, take from both sides, because it will really kind of open your mind up a little bit more.
And I think for me, what I would tell my younger self or kind of young people today, it's take risks because you are resilient. I think there were so many times where it was even what Jess was saying about like women who don't apply for something because they don't even feel qualified. But if you take that risk, and if you don't get the job, you're going to bounce back from that. That we can take on and go through. We just are hopefully starting to come out of a global pandemic. We are resilient, and during the pandemic, I mean, we've faced breast cancer, we've faced other atrocities at the same time. It doesn't, we're, starting a war. Like there are so many things, and we keep going, and we can keep going. And if you need to take a break, you take a break, but you get back in that saddle. I do think that, and I think women, this is just a bias because we've given birth 3 times. It's like, we're resilient. We're damn resilient. Know that. Own it. Take the risks. You can do it.
Fantastic. Speaking of resiliency or grit, one of the things that comes up a lot in conjunction with that is balance, and work-life balance is something that comes up a lot with where women are concerned. So not only as a leader, but also as an entrepreneur. Jess, what's your approach to balancing the demands of your personal versus professional life?
Yeah. I'd actually like to just tag one thing onto the last question too, which is just kind of minor and small. But I think oftentimes I see younger women that haven't gotten to this level of maturity and what I call like the fuck it 40, fuck it, I'm 40, is, we kind of undermine ourselves sometimes and do small things that kind of communicate to others that we aren't leaders or that we aren't up to the challenge. I think one thing, and I still catch myself doing that. And, one of the things that I do is step in to fill holes. And I've done a lot of work to kind of sit back and wait for someone else to step up instead of just immediately doing that. And I think, at a small level, that's everything from taking meeting notes, right? Like, I think that's one thing women do. Like we take the notes and people ask us to do that. And if we just waited and didn't step up to do that, we would either force somebody to ask us to do that, which we can then say no, or kind of reset the paradigm that's in place. So just wanted to add that on. And as far as work-life balance, I think the thing I've learned to do over time is just like figure out what's important to me. And if it's important to me, it's important making time for. I look at a lot of my peers that have families, and there's almost this in my female friends, there's an expectation that it's okay for them to take time off to deal with family issues or take care of kids. But as someone who doesn't have kids, I am sometimes put in a position where it's, the need for me to take time off is questioned. But, all of my male co-founders and co-leaders have kids, and they put their pickup times and their kid responsibilities on their calendar. And I just make sure to put my like twice a week weightlifting on there because that's what brings me happiness. Put my dates on there, like whatever is put forwarding me in my private life, just making sure that there's room for that and not necessarily hiding what that is either. Because I think it's easier to kind of like put like I'm out this weekend or I'm out this day and not kind of take ownership for that. But I think that actually communicating what's important to us is a critical piece in just creating that work-life balance space for anybody, no matter what their current kind of life environment is.
That's so true. I think sharing some of those things is also very humanizing element. I think that's something that women bring to the workforce is that humanizing element. People aren't resources or chess pieces; that they are actual humans with feelings, and getting to know them at that level is an amazing thing. Kelly, Celia, Meg, did you guys have any thoughts on balance? It makes me think a lot of that yoga thing, Kelly, but
Yeah. Yeah, I have a unique situation. So I owned the studio for about 10 years, and 7 years into it, I was diagnosed with breast cancer. And I am a type A workaholic. Anyone could ask me at any point, where is this one little paperclip in that studio? And I knew where everything was. I knew how everything was run. And I realized that this wasn't just something I could just plow through, right? I had to take time off. I've not, before this, I wasn't very good at taking time just for me. But I had a very trusted woman. She was a friend, but she was at the studio for years. And I remember I trained her to be me in about 45 minutes. But my takeaway was, please do not run this business like you've watched me do it. Just do it, do it how you want to do it. Because I think I was also in the process of like 7 years in. It was just this well-run machine. And so I wasn't thinking so much anymore about how to recreate. She did so many fantastic things that I never would have thought of. And it was, first of all, it allowed me time to just actually take care of myself. But she just did things that my brain wasn't going to do because I didn't have her brain. And so she knew the mission, she knew the heart, and I trusted her. And it was a very freeing lesson for me, because now I know, as long as there's someone you trust, they don't have to do it the right way. They just have to understand the right way, meaning my way, right? That everyone's way is right too. And so I often talk about how getting diagnosed with breast cancer saved my life, because it was a wake up call of like, you don't have to work all the time, and you can ask for help, and other people can do your job just as good, and you should be thankful for that.
That's great to hear that you're in recovery and that saved your life to a certain extent, and helped bring that balance to your journey. What piece of advice would you want to hand down to the new generation of women leaders, especially in the tech space, if you've got something to offer there? I know Meg was touching on that earlier about NFTs and having trouble finding folks that to join in on that kind of conference from a women's perspective. But is there a key piece of advice that you think is important?
Yes, I think it's really just about taking your seat at the table and starting. I don't think perfectionism is not a merit that is very helpful in terms of like getting started or in terms of learning about technology. So I'd focus on learning and taking that first step over any type of waiting for something to be perfect or waiting for you to have learned everything you need to learn. Like, you're going to learn by doing. So just take that first step.
I would just add to that yeah, no, very few mistakes are catastrophic. That there's usually a very fast path to recovery, and the part of the skill is actually determining, what mistakes are catastrophic and making sure that you're not doing those. But giving yourself room. Typically people talk about it as like fail fast, and I don't love the word failure because I think it has a negative connotation, but really just allowing yourself to have the space to make the space for mistakes, because you actually learn a lot more from them than getting everything right.
Yeah, there are a couple of things. One, I think that especially in my youth, I was hoping that there was kind of like a linear sequence to my career path, and that's just silly. I mean, that might have been like a previous generation where you kind of like stay in the same position for 30, 40 years. You have a giant retirement, 50 years in the same company. And I think that times have definitely changed. And I think that at one point I was probably like a little bit embarrassed. I'm like, oh my gosh, it feels like I've taken so many different paths. I've had off ramps to raise children, on again, off again. It's like, are people going to take me seriously? And when I actually piece all of those parts together, they brought me here, right? So, and there are these like kind of cool lines in which it all came together, which at the time I didn't think through. Being in a political campaign and doing community organizing. I love building communities, working in a festival where I got to plan events, again, with community, and then also working with headlining speakers that had founding experiences, and they were sharing and inspiring their stories. So, and I think the thing that makes me laugh that I just thought about now is my first job out of college as an English major. I worked for a magazine in Cambridge, Massachusetts. And I got the job as a temp. Like, that's what I was like, I'm going to live in Boston and temp. And they wanted to hire me. And I remember sitting with the editor-in-chief and just having I feel like those early part of years where you kind of have a lot of balls. And I remember asking for kind of an outrageous, I was like, well, I was thinking this for my salary, which at the time was really high. And I remember he kind of laughed a little. He's like, all right, well, we'll see what we can do. And he met it. And for me, it was that kind of like, well, you can't go lower than that. So that was my stepping stone, and I started out as an editorial assistant, and I ended up as an assistant editor, right? So it's just like you were kind of, I was a little, I kind of had those balls, and then I lost them a little bit, and then I gained them. But that's the roller coaster. It's not linear, and you're going to learn along the way. And again, it goes back to just taking risks. I mean, it isn't, like Jess said, it's not going to be catastrophic. I mean, unless you press a nuclear button, it's probably not catastrophic.
So true. I think unless you're trying to win a sprint, that straight line isn't the most enjoyable journey or the most scenic view. That crooked path usually is. It's the one that rounds those skills out and builds you as a person. So that's really amazing to hear. All right, to close us off today, I would love to hear from each of you about some sort of inspiration. What is your inspiration? Is it a role model, and who is that? Or is it a quote that you maybe live by? But something we can leave the audience with to reflect on, because maybe they will find inspiration in it too.
I'm happy to go first because it's very related to the topics we've been covering. So one of my role models is Sarah Blakely, and she founded Spanx, and she sold Spanx for over $1 billion. And she was self-funded to get started. And one of her quotes, I'm sure it came from someone else at some point, but she's the reason I know it, is making good decisions comes from experiences, and experience comes from making bad decisions. So it goes to just like that whole idea of leaning into failure and learning from your mistakes. And thank you so much for having me. It's been a joy to be on this podcast.
I would add, I think my inspiration is actually spending time with the people that are using products that I've contributed towards. I think, especially with tech, it's very easy to kind of sit back in the office and just look at the dashboards and like see what's happening. And while there's great value in that, going out to a throne and seeing the surprise and awe when somebody pushes the button to like open the sliding door is just one of like the most fantastic feelings. And being able to kind of get feedback in real time about like why what we're building is important and helpful. And I've learned so much more about the needs of toddlers and going to the bathroom since starting this too. So I appreciate what you guys have gone through as well. But I'd say that's my inspiration, plus also a little bit of advice, which is when you're in tech, maintain that personal connection as well, because it's so important for both motivation as well as the learning.
For me, I would say my biggest inspiration has always been what happens when women get together and start talking. Prior to opening the studio, I worked as a mental health therapist, and my focus was really domestic violence, sexual assault, and I ran groups. But the power that comes from women having confidence in themselves is unbelievable. And so for the last 20 years, my job has just been to uplift women, make them feel more confident. With yoga, moms will come back to me and say, some would come back and say, I want you to help me get back to my pre-pregnancy body. And I would just the first to say, like, I'm not your girl. That's not what I do. I am here to make you feel strong and confident, and hopefully you can meet other women who are on the same journey. And watching that from afar, and watching all these kind of women who came to me for one service but then ended up with their tribe. Like, I always tried to figure out at the studio, how could I monetize what the woman actually took from it, because it was all of their friends and their mom groups. And I mean, I still in these groups of women who were in class with her. So it's just the power of what happens when women just start talking, and their confidence goes up. It's my favorite thing.
And I would say for me, my inspiration I learned about when I was in business school. This is like 15 years ago, if you're doing the math. We had an entrepreneur in residence program, an intensive, and we got to meet and work with the folks at Eileen Fisher, which is a clothing company. And I remember thinking, this is just too good to be true. This is kind of like she's built this perfect organization. She really believes in a kind of flat leadership organization. She takes like most pride and concern for her employees. She's a B Corp. She started with $350 of startup money, and now she's valued at $400 million. And it's like 30 plus years later. And her kind of motivation was, and her thought was always, you can run a successful business while doing good. And I think oftentimes, especially from or what I would think of as more male-dominated businesses, where I don't know if that is always like, oh, I'm going to do something good. They're just like, I want to run a successful business, maybe, not to stereotype. And I think that is how we've always felt, because a little pushback we've gotten from men has been like, oh, don't you just want to make this a nonprofit? And it's like, no, we actually want to run a pretty cool, pretty successful business. And we're going to happen to do something kind of amazing for families. And so I think we can do both. And I'd love to inspire people to think similarly.
I think that's just such a great way to end the discussion, that you're standing up for your company and what you believe in, and saying, no, we've got this. We're going to do this thing. Thank you all so much for being here to share your experiences today. I want to thank Meg, Jessica, Celia, and Kelly for joining me for this fabulous discussion. Such an important topic with the celebration of Women's History Month. I hope all of you listening today feel inspired and hopeful for the future. We will also leave their websites and contact information here on this event page, so you can learn more about them and their businesses. Drop any comments or questions in the chat here on this page, and we'll be sure to get back to you. It's been a pleasure being your host. My name is Misty Smith. I'm with Shaco, and we will see you next time.